Alright, hello class, YouTube, whatever you want to be. Peoples, hello peoples. Yes, people, of course people. I said peoples on purpose, don't worry. I'm going to start one of many new series right now. And I'm going to use Google Docs as my whiteboard, because why not? And the first series is going to be this. Every lesson that I have in real life with real classes, and the first 5 minutes or so of one of the two lessons I usually have, I write mistakes on the board, usually 8 or 10 sentences, usually related to recent grammar or recent vocabulary that we've covered in class. So if you are a teacher and you're watching this and you want to steal this idea, which I'm sure is not original, to be honest, I'm sure that I stole it myself, you're welcome to it. You can use it. It's a good way of revising grammar and vocabulary. There are mistakes on the board, and I give students 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long the class is, to correct said mistakes. And then we go through it together, we talk about why they are mistakes, making sure that, my students definitely understand the grammar points, definitely understand the vocabulary that we've recently covered. And I'm going to do that with you guys on YouTube, and it's going to be the first of many parts, I guess. And the way it's going to work is I'm going to leave the sentences on the board, then I'm going to ask you to pause. If you don't pause, that's your choice, but it's better if you do actually take part and try to do it yourself, I think. If you really have no idea, then of course I will explain the mistakes later on. But I would suggest that you pause, try and correct the mistakes you can. If there are any that you don't know why, you'll probably learn something. If there are things that you already know, then fantastic, you can give yourself a great pat on the back and, laugh yourself all the way to the bank, because it won't make you any money. And there's no prize for winning. Oh well. Anyway, so there are going to be 10 sentences on the board, and I'm going to ask you to pause right now. So if you want to pause and have a go, do it now. Okay, if you haven't already paused the video, then I guess you're not going to. So let's go through the sentences as they are, starting with the first one. You speak English good. Of course, the sentence should be, you speak English well. I think this will be pretty easy for most of you, but I want to go through it anyway, because it is a common mistake that even advanced students make. So, good is an adjective that matches with a noun to explain the quality of the noun, whereas well is an adverb, which matches with a verb to describe how well we do the certain verb, at what ability we do a certain verb. So, sentences where good would be correct. He's a good boy. Good matches with boy. The idea is good. Good matches with the idea. Some other sentences where well is correct. He runs well. The ability at which he can run is good, and she plays football well. The ability at which she plays football is good. However, I did want to very quickly go through a little bit of advanced English here. You can say the sentence if you write a comma and emphasize it correctly, and it would be grammatically correct. So if we look down here where I've written the sentence again, you speak English. Good. Now this has a very different meaning to the top sentence. The first sentence, we're talking about the ability of the person's ability to speak English. In this sentence, however, we are talking about the fact that the person speaks English. So the fact the person can say hello, the fact the person doesn't only speak Spanish. This is good for us, it helps us. So this fact is good. You can also add the word that's in this sentence to make it even clearer if you have a problem with emphasis, for example. Moving on. Alright, with this second sentence, please explain me how to improve my English. There are two possible corrections. The problem here is that when we say explain with me, with nothing in between it, then we are asking for somebody to describe us. We're asking for somebody to talk about what we are, who we are, etc., depending on how philosophical you want to get on the question. But when we say explain me, we're telling somebody to give an explanation of ourselves. So the two options that we can use here to correct this sentence is please explain how to improve my English, so remove me completely, then it becomes clear that explain matches with improve my English, or please explain to me how to improve my English, then it becomes a passive sentence as opposed to an active sentence, so you become the subject as opposed to the object where you are if you place me directly after explain without to. It's a mistake that is commonly made, especially with advanced students for some reason. I tend to find that intermediate students do this better. It's kind of strange. I think somewhere this information gets lost as you learn more and more about the language, but it's quite an important distinction to make, and it's a very common mistake. So have a go at fixing that one. Said and told usually require an entire lesson to go through. To be honest, I've done many a lesson on said and told in the past, but I'm going to keep it simple here. You said me that it was yesterday. Said doesn't need any kind of pronoun to help it in a sentence. When we say you said, he said, she said, etc., the bit that follows on is always going to be exactly what was said without context of who said it or who it was said to. So we say, you said, and then it's kind of like afterwards we have these quotation marks. So, for example, it is Friday could have been the actual sentence. And it's Saturday today, so you said it was yesterday. So we are using it in the same way, where we don't add me, you, he, she, it here, because we don't need it. We don't need it here in the same way. However, if we do use the word told, told actually does need a pronoun to help it grammatically. So we always actually add who received the information. So in this situation, you told me that it was yesterday, as opposed to simply you told. So the things to take away from this one mainly is said stands on its own, told requires a pronoun, and it is a common mistake at all levels of English. Even natives make this mistake, to be honest, and that is quite frankly embarrassing. If you are a native, then stop making this mistake, please. I find these sentences two of the most interesting in the list, actually, because they are very common mistakes, and they are again mistakes that native speakers make all the time, and they're frustrating when they are made, by native speakers especially. I find a lot of people actually know this is a mistake, but not a lot of people know exactly why, and I'm going to try and go through that now. And I'm going to put both of these together because the correction is exactly the same. The second one is more a mistake that Slavic speakers make, because it's the way they would make the sentence in their own language. So, me and my wife are going to the cinema, or we with my wife are going to the cinema. They're slightly different in how they're wrong, and I'll explain both. But I'll start with the easy one, actually. Let's start with the second one. So when we say we with my wife, this kind of suggests that there are 3 people, whereas you want to say there are 2. So we already means at least 2 people, and then there's my wife on top of that, which is a strange sentence, but we'll quickly move past that. So we with my wife is going to be completely wrong because it suggests 3 people when we want to say 2 people. The correction is my wife and I are going to the cinema. And the way to help you understand this basically is, imagine the sentence if it was just you, not you and another person, but just you. If you were making that sentence, so just I and going to the cinema, then you wouldn't use the word me. We would never say the sentence, me am going to the cinema. We would say, I am going to the cinema. And this works exactly the same way. So basically when you're making this construction, just imagine that this isn't there. And that's basically the way that you can remember that's how it works grammatically. So every time you say me and my wife, it sounds awful. So please don't do it. This was a sentence that I was referring to when I said that natives may be a little bit shocked by this one, because believe it or not, you can see this in a supermarket. I tend to find it's more common when I see American shows when it says 10 items or less, but you can see it in supermarkets in Britain as well. And it's completely wrong. And that's why it's kind of strange that I have to talk about this one, but 10 items or fewer would be the correct grammatical sentence. Less is always matched with uncountable nouns. So for example, we can have less money, less time, less knowledge, because we can't have one money, we can't have one time, we can't have one knowledge. So these are uncountable. We have less of them. Fewer are used with countable nouns, so fewer apples, fewer people, fewer memories. As the noun is items, this is countable, so of course we use the word fewer. And etc. Of course, as a sentence, this doesn't work full stop. We can't just simply say and etc. There's no context. There's no content in that sentence at all, so it's not a sentence. But I usually find that students tend to try and use this word etc., which is fantastic. You should definitely try and use the word. It's really useful to use, but don't use it with and. And the reason is because etc. or to write it out in full. Let's just do that quickly, etc. In different writing, sure. Etc. already means and more things like this. So basically when you say and etc., you are saying and more things like this. So and is already part of the meaning. Et actually is and in the sentence, in the word I should say. That one's pretty straightforward, just wanted to leave that one as it was. This might be another one that shocks the natives who are watching. You could have done better. Yeah, this structure simply doesn't exist. We can't use could of. It's not a thing. Put simply, it doesn't exist. So could of is could have. Just sometimes when we're speaking very quickly, it sounds like we say could have, but we're actually saying could have as opposed to could of. So when we contract it, it sounds kind of like could of, but the sentence is always could have, absolutely always. So do keep that in mind. In this sentence, the difference is actually quite subtle, but it's also really important. There's a difference between go and come, and it's a very good example here where the difference can change the sentence completely. Go doesn't work in this sentence, full stop. So will you go to me if I'm sick should be will you come to me if I'm sick. Go is a general verb that means to be in one place, then travel to another place. I go to the shop every week. I start at home, I go to the shop, I come back home. I go. ABA, in that case it says from A to B, but it can be from A to B to A as well. Come, on the other hand, is slightly more specific. When you come somewhere, it means that basically you were somewhere else, not here, or not with said person, and then you came towards them. So you went in the direction of them, as opposed to simply going. So will you go to me if I'm sick is incorrect because we're actually going to me in this sentence, which means that we have a destination that is not where we are, but we are actually the object and we are going to the subject. So we use come in this sentence. Will you come to me if I'm sick? Okay, and lastly then, I quite succeed in my studies. This is a very common mistake actually, and it's kind of like number one, the good versus well thing, kind of, but not exactly. The problem here is the word quite. Quite is what we call a quantifier, and it tells us how strong an adjective is. So we can't use it to say, we can't use it with a verb. Succeed is a verb, and that doesn't work. It's used with an adjective. So instead of saying I quite succeed, which actually works in many languages, if you translate it literally, it is quite a successful sentence. But literal translations very rarely work when you are talking about languages. So we actually have to match it with the adjective. The adjective from succeed is successful, and we also need to add the verb to help us with the sentence. The verb would be be, so I am quite successful in my studies. Okay, that's it for these sentences. So a few things you can do for me actually, if you can help out here. Normally when I'm doing this, of course, I have student interaction. So if I don't explain something clearly, my student puts up the hand and they go, what? And then I explain it again. I don't have that interaction here, so can you please do that in the comments below? Not literally, please do not give me a comment saying, what? But ask, for me to clarify something and I can respond in comments. Also, if there are any common mistakes, or if there are any sentences that confuse you a bit, then please do leave them in the comments below as well, and I will try and add them in future videos. The other ideas that I have, as well as the common mistakes, I want to go through some idioms, which are very popular with my students. I want to go through British and American English, the differences, and words that are often confused, so for example hard and hardly, to give a very brief and quick example. That's what I plan to do going forward. And the big thing, if I can get a little bit of an audience here, and I know that my students are interested, and maybe some of the guys in the gaming community that I'm part of that aren't native English are interested, I would like to do some live teacher-student Q&As. So I'll be live on YouTube, and you guys can ask me whatever you want, and I will do my best to explain the grammar point, the vocabulary point, etc. is something that I'm quite good at in class. It's a slightly different medium here, but I hope that I can also do it while live in front of a computer. Hopefully my brain works just as well. So if that's something you're interested in, then please tell me that as well. That'll be all for this video though. Thank you very much, and I'll be back with another one at some point. I'd like to say soon, but I don't know how soon it would be realistically. So thank you for watching, good luck in your studies, ask any further questions below. Bye bye for now.